John Hansen from Denmark has written in saying, I'd be very grateful for any hints and tips you could give about getting started writing a fantasy novel or maybe just a short story. In your opinion, which standards should be a part of fantasy novels? Any advice would be very much appreciated. Well, now you've opened a whole can of worms there. This could be a whole hour seminar, I'm sure, in and of itself. In terms of standards for a fantasy novel, I suppose stories have certain qualities which would class them as a fantasy novel, but I don't believe to write a fantasy novel you should start looking to put standards in, like, oh, it's got to have a dragon and a wizard and a magic sword. Because chances are it's going to be a cliche, or it's been done before. You want to approach things originally. That said, I've got an idea for my own series of books which have dragons, wizards and magical swords, and I try and turn it all on its head. But I won't give that away now. So, I remember a friend of mine, when I wrote my first book, Spellbreaker, thought it'd be full of cliches, and he said, does it have a wizard? And I said no. Does it have dragons? I said no. I think he mentioned a magic sword, and I said yes, but he seemed quite impressed it didn't have all the standards. In terms of getting started, if you've not written anything before, I know some people say you need to write a short story first before you try and write a novel. I know of published novelists who've never written a short story, so that's blatantly not true for everybody. For me, I wrote a book first, so it was a game book, which is a different beast altogether. Then I wrote short fiction, then I wrote novels, and it worked for me. So I would suggest starting with something short, because I mean, to tackle something like a novel, which is 80 to 130,000 words, it takes 3 months doing it full time. So don't give up your day job and then say I'm going to write a novel. That said, I have this big bugbear about people who say I want to be a writer and never write anything. If you want to write. Don't necessarily start off thinking this is going to be this long, or it's going to be this, or it's going to be that, or here's my novel trilogy. Just get writing, and to do that you need to read. So if you're thinking of writing fantasy, read lots of fantasy, but also read other things around it. Non-fiction, all sorts of things, anything, a different writing style, things written in first person, chick lit, modern contemporary fiction, classics, anything at all to help you find a voice. And just Dan Abnett, who's a friend and someone I hugely admire as a writer as well, he says if you don't put words in, you can't get words out. So it really is as simple as that. Hamza says, this may seem like an odd question, but there is much speculation amongst us fighting fantasy fans, so here we go. To the best of your knowledge, was Fighting Fantasy 54 Legend of Zagor written completely by Ian Livingstone, or did Carl Sargent (brackets Keith Martin) play a part in the writing of the gamebook? There's a question. I have my own theories, as I'm sure many people do. I don't know for sure. Only met Carl the once, and I don't think he'd written I don't think the book had been written at the time. I know that he helped write the Zagor Chronicles. Helped as in possibly wrote the Zagor Chronicles with input from Ian. I've never spoken to Ian about it, so I don't know. So I've probably given away enough already. So I think we'll leave that one there. Susie asks, any plans to write another FF game book? If so, when will it be published? Susie, I've always got plans to write another FF game book. They were my first love, and now I'm a professional writer. I jump at the chance to write another one. I just love them. And I find them exciting and a different challenge. They're a different pace to writing a novel. One of the things I love about them is the fact they're illustrated, and you get to work in collaboration with an illustrator. And I've been fortunate enough to work with some great illustrators like Tony Hoff and Martin McKenna. At the moment, I've always got plans. Let's just say there's nothing definite at the moment. Next year, 2012, sees the 30th anniversary of the series, and I would love it if something happened which were to mark that momentous occasion. I know I'd like to happen, and I think other people would like something to happen as well. I don't know what. So let's hope there's another fighting fantasy book published in 2012. Beyond that, as to what it will be or who will write it, I don't know. But fingers crossed. again, on the subject of fighting fantasy, Gordon MacLeod has been in touch. He runs, I think it's the Fighting Fantasy Adventures page on Facebook. So, hi Gordon. He says, I'd like to ask a question. I felt that Eye of the Dragon was a really hard book to complete. It came out in between two of your books, and I was wondering how gamebook authors try to get the balance right between a challenge and still being great fun. Do other books influence your decisions, or feedback from them? Well, it's no secret that my first forays into fighting fantasy game books are tricky to the point of being impossible. And I had a lot of feedback about that, particularly with the advent of the internet. They sold very well at the time. And I think, do authors try to get the balance right? If I'm honest, when I wrote my first one, I think I was trying to write a book for somebody like myself who knew all the tricks, and I was trying to beat the cheaters. And in the process, possibly forgot that the idea was for the reader to have fun. It's a bit like those computer games that Dara Breen was talking about. If you weren't good enough, you were punished. You couldn't get any further. If people are going to cheat, they're going to cheat. There's nothing you can do about it, and that's their decision. Maybe that people find it more satisfying to play the books properly. Maybe some people just want to read the story and find out what happens at the end. So I now have a very different approach to my game books in that, yes, I do consciously try to make them fair. You want them to be a challenge as well, because if something's too easy, there's no satisfaction in completing it. And also there is an element of the replay value. You want to be able to go back and explore different parts and find out new things. So yes, I now work very hard to balance it out. I work out my encounters, I make copious notes, I write the book, I try to make sure if there's opportunities where you're going to be injured, you make sure there's opportunities where you can be healed. If there's curses, you have benefits. If there's nasty objects, you have good objects. It sounds very simplistic, but that's an element of it. Do other books influence your decisions? Yes, because I think some people have done it very well. And feedback from them most definitely, particularly the feedback I received from my early books. When I came to write Howl of the Werewolf, I was very conscious that I wanted it to be perfectly possible to complete the book. I actually restructured the rules at the start to make that the case, as well as to add something to the nature of the book, in that you're basically turning into a werewolf yourself, and I wanted that to be reflected in the rules. And with that one, I was very aware that people in this day and age of computer games don't want to read the whole idea of finding the one correct way through the book has lost its appeal. So I wanted to have a book which could be completed in multiple ways, and it ended up being very long as a result. But it means that you can play the game and go a completely different route and still succeed, but it's still a challenge as well. I think possibly with Night of the Necromancer, I've got it as close to completely balanced as I have in any book, although I know that some people aren't so keen on the hub mechanic that I use in that book. So if I get an opportunity to write another one, and I have an idea what it would be if I do, possibly the hub would vanish from that. Matt B asks, was just wondering when and where your next signing would be. I didn't get the chance to go to the SFX Weekender, too far away. I live in North Wales. I've been a fan of your 40k work for a while and it'd be really nice to meet you. Well, that's very nice of you to say so. Consider this an initial meeting. Hi, Matt. As to when my next signing will be, I don't know. I've been talking to the guys at Abaddon Books about doing some signings for the Pax Britannia stuff. And of course, there's the next book, Anno Frankenstein, coming out in May. And I know that things like Piccadilly Waterstones have been putting up steampunk displays which feature Pax Britannia prominently. So I'm hoping that through that we can organise something. Where again, I don't know. I mean, I'm based in London. And obviously that's where all sorts of events take place, so that's quite an easy one for me, and I realise not so good if you live in North Wales. If that changes, I will obviously publish it on my blog, and maybe it's time I need to start looking at arranging a signing tour. Goodness, if I'm not getting too carried away there.